Ronda Rousey had been through all kinds of unusual requests during her career, but nothing prepared her for the message she received one quiet morning. She had just finished a light workout, still catching her breath, when her phone buzzed with an email notification. Usually, she ignored unknown senders, but the subject line made her pause. It read, "A personal invitation from Leonardo Valteri." Even someone who knew nothing about classical music would recognize that name. Leonardo Valteri was a world-renowned pianist, famous not only for his remarkable skill, but for his dramatic personality. He was the kind of person who walked into a room and people instantly whispered. Some admired him, some criticized him, but nobody ignored him. Stories about his temper, his love for perfection, and his strange artistic habits circled the internet for years. Ronda opened the message. It was surprisingly short, written in a calm but confident tone. Valteri invited her to his private music estate on the edge of a quiet coastal town. According to the message, he was working on a new project, something that would combine human instinct, rhythm, and emotion in a way the world had never seen. He believed Ronda had something inside her that could unlock the heart of the project. She reread the message several times. There was no explanation of what she was supposed to do, or why he had chosen her out of all people. At first, she thought it might be a prank or an exaggerated publicity stunt. But the signature at the bottom was real, and the logo matched his official foundation. The invitation came with a private driver's information and a simple line. "I ask only that you come with an open mind." Ronda sat down, letting the idea settle. She had never met Valteri, never spoken to him, and never worked with anyone from the music world. She respected artists, but piano projects were nowhere near her usual interests. Even so, there was something about the message that tugged at her curiosity. Maybe it was the boldness of it. Maybe it was the mystery. Or maybe she just needed something unexpected in her life. By the afternoon, she decided to go. The next morning, a black car arrived right on time. The driver was polite, soft-spoken, and focused on his task, barely saying more than a greeting. The ride took them along the coastline, where the ocean stretched peacefully under a pale blue sky. Ronda watched the waves for a while, wondering why someone like Valteri wanted to meet her so urgently. After nearly an hour, the car turned down a long road lined with tall trees. The path looked like something out of a movie, quiet, calm, and almost too perfect. At the end sat a large stone building with wide steps and tall windows. The place didn't look like a normal home. It looked more like a sanctuary built for sound. Even from outside, she could imagine echoes stretching through the walls. When the driver opened the door, a light breeze carried the soft smell of old wood and fresh sea air. An assistant stood at the entrance waiting for her, dressed neatly and smiling warmly. The assistant introduced themselves simply and respectfully, then guided her inside without rushing her. Inside, the estate felt even more unusual. The hallways were decorated with framed photos of past performances, handwritten sheet music, and shelves filled with old piano books. Everything was organized with care, but there was also a sense of intensity in the air. As if every room had a purpose, Ronda followed the assistant down a long hallway, listening to the faint sound of a distant piano. It wasn't a simple tune. It was deep, emotional, and filled with tension. Whoever was playing wasn't just practicing. They were living through the melody. She didn't need to be told that it was Valteri. The assistant stopped at a set of large wooden doors carved with swirling designs. "He's inside," they said. "He asked you to come alone." Their tone was calm, but respectful, almost as if everyone in the estate followed Valteri's rules with quiet devotion. Ronda nodded and pushed the doors open. The room on the other side was stunning. Soft golden light poured through high windows, landing beautifully on a grand piano placed in the center. The walls were lined with books, candles, and old records. It felt warm, almost magical. In the middle of it all, Leonardo Valtieri sat at the piano, his fingers dancing across the keys. His posture was elegant but intense, the kind of focus only someone deeply connected to their craft could show. When he noticed her, he stopped playing. The final note hung in the air like a breath that refused to leave. "Ronda Rousey," he said, standing up slowly. His voice was surprisingly gentle. "Thank you for coming." Ronda expected a dramatic entrance or some overly artistic behavior. But instead, he walked toward her calmly, studying her expression with quiet curiosity, as though he were trying to read a hidden story behind her eyes. "I know this must seem strange," he said, offering a small but sincere smile. "But I invited you here for a reason. You have something I need for my next work. Something rare." Ronda folded her arms lightly. "I appreciate the invitation," she said, "but I still don't know why I'm here." "You will," he replied. "But first, I need to understand you, not your career, not your public image. You." She wasn't sure how to respond. She had been interviewed thousands of times, questioned, analyzed, and talked about endlessly, but never in a way that felt like someone was searching beyond the usual layers. Valtieri continued watching her with the same curious expression. He gestured toward the piano. "Before anything else, I want to see how you react to music. Rhythm lives inside all of us, especially those who fight, struggle, and rise. You've lived through pressure that most people can't imagine. I want to observe how your emotions respond to sound." Ronda blinked. "You want me to listen?" "No," he said simply. "I want you to play." She laughed, thinking he was joking. But Valtieri's expression didn't change. He wasn't teasing. He wasn't being dramatic. He was being completely serious. "You don't understand," she said, still smiling a little. "I don't play piano." "At all. That is exactly why I want you to try," he replied. "Pure reaction. No technique. No habits. Just emotion." She hesitated. The whole thing felt strange. She had come here expecting maybe a conversation, maybe some filming for a documentary, maybe even a fitness music crossover idea. She definitely hadn't expected to be told to sit at a piano like a student on her first day of music class. Still, something about the way he spoke made her pause. He wasn't forcing her. He wasn't being rude. He genuinely believed she had something worth discovering. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, completely. He walked back toward the piano and gently patted the bench. Ronda stepped closer, feeling her heartbeat pick up just a little. She had walked into arenas with thousands of people watching her. She had faced opponents stronger and faster than she could predict. Yet somehow, sitting at a piano felt more intimidating than any match she had fought. She lowered herself onto the bench. Up close, the piano was even more beautiful. The wood had a soft shine, the keys smooth and clean. She placed her hands above the keys, unsure where to begin. "Just touch one note," Valtieri said quietly. Then another. "Let your hands guide you." Ronda pressed a single key. The sound rang through the room clear, simple, almost small. She pressed another, then a third. The notes didn't form any pattern, but the sound felt surprisingly calming. She looked at Valtieri. He didn't speak. He didn't correct her. He simply watched, paying attention to every small detail, the way she moved her hands, the way she breathed, the way her shoulders relaxed or tensed. Ronda tried a few more keys, experimenting with the sound. She didn't know what she was doing, but something about it intrigued her. Maybe it was the unusual quiet of the room, or maybe it was the fact that she wasn't expected to perform perfectly for once. She was just exploring. After a moment, Valtieri stepped beside her. "Good," he said gently. "Now close your eyes." She raised a brow. Is that part necessary? Only if you want to understand why you're truly here. She hesitated, but eventually closed her eyes. The darkness helped her focus on the keys beneath her fingertips. She pressed another note, then another. The room felt different now, slower, still, almost like it was waiting for her. You feel that? Valtteri asked quietly. I guess, she murmured. That's instinct, he said. Most people lose it as they grow older. But you never did. That's why I called you? Rhonda opened her eyes. You still haven't told me what you want from me. I will, he promised, but not today. He stepped back, giving her space. For now, he said, I only need one thing, your trust. Just for the first step. Rhonda looked at the piano again, and at him. She didn't fully understand the situation, but something inside her told her to stay a little longer. Not out of obligation, but out of curiosity. Something about this moment felt like the beginning of a story she didn't want to walk away from too soon. All right, she said softly. I'll trust you. For now. Valtteri smiled, not a dramatic, exaggerated smile, but a real one, warm and meaningful. Good, he said. Then part one has begun. Rhonda didn't know what he meant by that, but she felt a shift inside herself, small, but real. Maybe she had stepped into something strange and unexpected. Maybe she wasn't sure where this journey was going, but something told her that whatever came next would change everything. Ronda Rousey returned to the estate the next day with a strange mix of curiosity and confusion sitting in her chest. After her first visit, she had felt something she couldn't quite describe. It wasn't fear. It wasn't excitement. It was something in between, like standing at the edge of a quiet ocean, unsure whether to walk deeper or turn back. She had known challenges all her life, but this one felt different because she had no idea what she was supposed to fight, learn, or prepare for. Leonardo Valtteri had left her with more questions than answers. His calm expression, the way he watched her like she was part of a puzzle only he could see, and his insistence that she play the piano even though she had no experience. None of it lined up with anything she had been through before. Yet she returned, drawn by something she had felt the moment she touched the piano keys. It was small, barely noticeable, but real, like a quiet whisper inside her, asking her to explore further. This time, when she stepped out of the car, the estate looked even larger than she remembered. The morning sun reflected off the windows, and the soft sound of distant music drifted through the open hallways. It wasn't the dramatic, intense melody she had heard yesterday. This one was slower, thoughtful, almost gentle. As she walked up the steps, she wondered if Valtteri played this way on purpose. Knowing she was coming, the same assistant from the day before greeted her at the door. Their smile was warm but measured, as though they were used to dealing with guests who didn't know what to expect. He's waiting in the piano room, the assistant said politely. Rhonda nodded and followed the familiar path down the hallway. She moved more confidently this time, but she still paid attention to every detail. The place felt almost alive, not in a strange way, but in an artistic way, like every corner held some small piece of Valtteri's mind. There were framed photos of him performing at different stages of his life. There were shelves filled with books about music, history, and emotion. Every object felt intentional. When she reached the large wooden doors, she pushed them open without waiting. Inside, the piano room looked exactly as it had the day before. Warm light filling the space, shelves lined with music books, candles placed neatly around the room, and the grand piano sitting proudly at the center, like the heart of the estate. But this time, Valtteri wasn't playing. He stood near the piano with his hands resting lightly on the lid, as if he had been waiting the moment she stepped into the building. He gave her a gentle smile as she walked in. Good, he said. You came back. I said I'd try, she replied. And I appreciate that, he said calmly. Most people run away when they don't understand something. Rhonda raised an eyebrow. Is that supposed to be a compliment? It's an observation, he said simply, but the softness in his voice made it feel like a compliment anyway. I don't want you to feel pressured here. Everything we do will happen at your pace. But I will be honest with you. Rhonda, I invited you for a reason. And the more you open yourself to this place, the more you will understand it. She crossed her arms loosely. You still haven't told me what that reason is. And I will, he assured her, but not before you learn the language of this room. Rhonda gave him a puzzled look. What does that mean? Sit, he said, motioning to the piano bench. Rhonda sighed and took a seat, feeling a bit like a student who had been sent to class without knowing the lesson. She placed her hands above the keys, but didn't touch them yet. Valtteri walked around the piano slowly, his steps soft and almost soundless on the wooden floor. Most people think music begins with playing, he said. But music begins with listening. I'm listening, she replied. Not with your ears, he said, stopping behind her. With your feelings. Rhonda let out a small breath, unsure if she should take his words seriously or treat them as artistic exaggerations. But the sincerity in his voice made her try. She straightened her back and relaxed her shoulders a little. Valtteri came around to the side of the piano, where he could see her hands clearly. Yesterday, you touched the keys with hesitation, but that was normal. Today, I want something different. Don't think about how it should sound. Don't think about what I expect. Just touch the keys the way you feel right now. Whatever that emotion is, use it. What emotion? She asked honestly. You tell me, he replied. She looked at the keys, letting her thoughts settle. She wasn't frustrated or angry or sad. She was curious, deeply curious, and maybe a tiny bit unsure of herself. She hadn't felt that way in a long time. She pressed a key. A soft note filled the room. She pressed another. The sound was still simple, but something about it felt different from yesterday. It felt more honest, even if she didn't know what she was doing. Valtteri listened carefully, nodding slightly. Better, he said quietly. Less fear. I wasn't afraid yesterday, she said. Everyone is afraid on their first step, he replied gently. Not of the piano, but of discovering something new about themselves. She didn't respond. She didn't know how Dottie gestured for her to play again. Try a few more notes. Let your hands move a little. Don't rush. Don't force anything. Rhonda pressed different keys slowly. Sometimes they sounded pleasant. Sometimes they clashed. But for the first time, she didn't feel embarrassed. There was no audience waiting for her to perform perfectly. No camera pointed at her. No pressure to win or impress anyone. It was just her, the piano, and the quiet world inside this room. After a moment, she stopped. Is this really what you brought me here for? She asked softly. Just to hit random notes? Valtteri lowered himself onto a low chair near the piano. Not exactly, he said. But this is how we begin. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. Do you know why I became interested in you? Because I'm a fighter? She guessed. No, he said. Because you are more than a fighter. Rhonda tilted her head. How so? I've watched how you carry yourself, he said. Not in the ring. Outside of it. You move with purpose, even when you're still. You speak with a weight that most people can't imitate. You have lived through pressure that bends others into pieces. But somehow you remain whole. She listened quietly, unsure how to respond. Compliments usually didn't sit comfortably with her, especially ones that came wrapped in such poetic language. You think I don't know anything about pressure, Valtteri continued, but I do. Not the same as yours, but pressure is pressure. The world expects perfection from me, every time I step onto a stage. One wrong note is enough to start a storm of criticism. One imperfect emotion, and people call me unstable, dramatic, or unreasonable. I know what it means to carry expectations that never seem to end." He took a slow breath, his gaze drifting toward the piano. "But the difference between us is simple. You learned how to use your pressure to move forward. I used mine to hide." Rhonda watched him quietly. She had never imagined someone like him would say something like that. But he wasn't saying it for sympathy. He was saying it to make her understand something deeper. "These keys," he said, lightly tapping the piano lid, "do not respond to technique alone. They respond to honesty. When you touched them yesterday, you didn't realize it, but the sound that came out was pure. It was raw. It was something I've been searching for." "Why me?" she whispered. "Because you don't hide from yourself," he said simply. "Even when you don't understand something." He stood up slowly and walked to the other side of the piano. "Today, we will take one more step. I want you to play with both hands." "I don't know how to do that," she protested. "You don't need to know," he replied. "Just try." She placed both hands on the keys, feeling a little awkward. Her left hand didn't know where to go. Her right hand felt more comfortable, but not by much. "Start with a simple pattern," Valtteri said. "Left hand, one note. Right hand, two notes. Don't worry how it sounds." She tried. It sounded uneven at first, almost clumsy. But she kept going, following his instructions without overthinking them. Slowly, she began finding small patterns that felt natural. Nothing she played would be considered music, but it wasn't noise either. It was something between the two. Valtteri watched her with genuine interest. "You're progressing faster than you realize," he said. "I feel like I'm just messing around," she admitted. "That is how all discovery begins," he replied. After several minutes, she stopped to stretch her fingers. "So," she said, "is this going to be an everyday thing?" "Only if you allow it," he replied calmly. "I don't want this to feel like training. I want it to feel like exploring. I want you to understand the rhythm inside yourself. And once you do, then I'll show you why you're truly here." She leaned back slightly. "That sounds like you're hiding something." "I'm not hiding," he said. "I'm waiting." "Waiting for what?" He smiled softly, almost mysteriously. "For you to hear yourself." Rhonda frowned. "I don't get it." "You will," he said. "Not today, but soon." She looked down at the keys again, tracing them lightly with her fingertips. She didn't know what she was supposed to understand, but she felt something shifting inside her. Something quiet but persistent. Something that pushed her to keep going. Valtteri stepped closer and gently closed the lid of the piano. "That's enough for today," he said. "Your mind needs time to settle. Come back tomorrow. Same time. You're really committed to this, aren't you?" She said with a small smile. "Very," he replied. "Because I have never heard someone play the way you did yesterday. Not with skill, but with truth. And once you. Rhonda returned to the estate on the third day with a clearer mind, but a deeper curiosity. She had slept surprisingly well the night before, even though her thoughts kept drifting back to the piano room. She didn't know why the place lingered in her mind the way it did. Something about the quiet light, the warm wooden shelves, and the gentle weight of the piano keys made her feel connected to a part of herself she never really explored. As the car approached the estate, she felt a calmness she hadn't expected. Maybe she was getting used to the routine. Maybe she was settling into the idea that this strange journey, as Valtteri called it, might actually lead somewhere meaningful. The same assistant greeted her with a polite nod. "Good morning," they said. "He's in the same room." Rhonda thanked them and made her way down the long hallway. She noticed details she hadn't seen before: the tiny cracks in the stone walls, The soft sound of wind brushing past the tall windows, the way the floorboards gently creaked as she walked. Everything felt peaceful, almost meditative. When she pushed open the piano room doors, she found Valtteri sitting on the bench, not playing, but quietly staring at the piano. He looked deep in thought, his fingers lightly tapping the closed lid. The moment he noticed her, his expression softened. "Right on time," he said. "I'm getting used to the schedule," she replied. He stood up, smoothing the sleeves of his shirt. "Good. Today is important." Ronda raised an eyebrow. "You've said that every day. And each day it becomes more true," he said simply. She shook her head with a small laugh. "You really like speaking in riddles." "It keeps the mind awake," he said with a gentle smile. This time, he didn't guide her immediately to the bench. Instead, he walked toward one of the shelves on the far wall. The shelf held a collection of small notebooks, some thin, some thick, all slightly worn around the edges. He pulled out one of them and brought it to her. "What's this?" Ronda asked. "A journal," he replied. "My journal." She hesitated, unsure why he would hand her something so personal. "Open it," he said. She flipped the cover open. The pages were filled with neat handwriting, sketches of musical notes, emotional reflections, even small doodles in the margins. Some pages looked rushed and emotional, while others were organized and calm. "You wrote all this?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "Every piece of music I've ever created began here. Every emotion, every idea, every moment of clarity and confusion." Ronda looked up at him. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because today isn't about playing," he said. "Not at first. Today is about understanding why you're here." She felt her pulse quicken slightly. "So you're finally going to tell me?" "In a way," he said. "But first, I want you to listen to something." He walked back to the piano and opened the lid gently, as if he were lifting something fragile. Then he sat down and positioned his hands above the keys. His posture shifted from relaxed to focused, the way a painter might prepare before touching a brush to canvas. "This piece," he said softly, "was written during the most difficult time of my life." Ronda didn't know what he meant, but she stayed silent. He began to play. The melody was slow at first, almost hesitant. Each note felt like a breath held a second too long before being released. The room absorbed every sound, stretching the music through the air like threads of emotion woven together. Ronda felt something shift within her chest as the melody grew deeper. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was quiet, sincere, and full of something she couldn't fully name. About halfway through, the tone changed. The notes became sharper, more urgent, as though the music were trying to express a struggle without using words. Ronda leaned forward slightly, unable to look away from his hands. The way his fingers moved across the keys, sometimes forcefully, sometimes barely touching, told a story all on its own. Finally, the piece softened again, returning to a gentler rhythm before ending on a single, long note that echoed through the room. When he lifted his hands, the silence that followed felt heavier than the music. Ronda waited for him to speak. He didn't look at her. He looked at the piano, as if still inside the emotion of the piece. "That," he said quietly, "was the moment I realized I had lost myself." The words hung in the air. Fragile but honest, Ronda didn't erupt. "I had spent years performing for the world," he continued, his voice low but steady. "Every stage, every audience, every review, it all became a mirror I couldn't step away from. I forgot why I played. I forgot who I was. I became someone who only existed through the expectations of others." He finally looked up at her. "You know that feeling, don't you?" Ronda held his gaze. She didn't need to speak. The answer was already in her eyes. He nodded softly. You do. She exhaled slowly. Maybe, but we lived different lives. Yes, he agreed. But pressure doesn't care about the path. Only the weight. She sat down on the bench beside him. So, you brought me here because we're both tired? He laughed gently, not mocking, just amused. No, I brought you here because you're not broken. That surprised her. What do you mean? You bend, but you don't break, he said. Even when the world pushes you beyond what seems possible. Even when you lose, you find a way to stand again. That resilience. That truth. It's rare. She looked down, unsure how to respond. He closed the journal and placed it on the piano. You played yesterday in a way I've never heard from someone with no training. Not because the notes were good, they weren't, but the emotion was pure. You didn't try to impress. You didn't try to hide. You just played. Rhonda ran her fingers lightly along the edge of the piano bench. Okay, but where does this lead? He stood up and walked a few steps away, giving her space. Today, he said, I want to see something new. Something deeper. She raised an eyebrow. How deep are we talking? As deep as you're willing to go. He walked back and motioned for her to place her hands on the keys. I want you to play again. But this time, think of a moment, not a painful one, not a dramatic one. Just a moment that shaped you. I'm not sure I can do that, she said. Just try, he replied gently. Close your eyes if you need to. She inhaled slowly. Then she placed her hands on the keys and closed her eyes. At first, she didn't move. She sat completely still, listening to the quiet hum of the room, feeling the smooth surface of the keys beneath her fingertips. Her thoughts drifted, not to a victory, not to a spotlight, but to something small. A moment from long before fame, long before cameras, long before expectations, a time when she felt young, free, and untouched by the weight of the world. Gradually, her fingers began to move. Soft notes emerged, uncertain, but gentle. They carried a kind of innocence she hadn't felt in a long time. She didn't know what she was creating, but she felt it rather than thought about it. The melody wasn't perfect. It wasn't even structured. But it was honest. Valtteri watched her closely, his expression calm but deeply focused. Her right hand played a few higher notes, slightly shaky, but full of quiet sincerity. Her left hand followed, adding a simple rhythm. The blend sounded almost like a memory, coming to life soft around the edges, but warm in the center. After a minute, the sound faded as her hands stilled again. She opened her eyes slowly. That, Valtteri said softly, is exactly what I needed to hear. Rhonda looked unsure. It didn't sound good. It wasn't supposed to sound good, he said. It was supposed to sound real. And it did. She let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. So what happens now? Now, he said, we take the next step. He pulled a small stool toward the piano and sat beside her. I want you to play again. But this time, I want to guide your left hand. My left hand? She asked. Yes, he said. Your left hand sets the foundation. The right hand follows emotion. The left hand follows intention. He reached out but didn't touch her until she nodded. Then he gently positioned her fingers on a few lower keys. Press here, he instructed. She pressed a soft note. Now here. She followed his guidance. He helped her find a simple pattern, slow, steady, almost like a heartbeat. She repeated it a few times on her own. Good, he said. Now add whatever your right hand feels. Rhonda hesitated, then let her right hand wander again. This time, the music felt slightly fuller, not organized, not professional, but real. Valtteri nodded along with the rhythm, letting her move entirely on her own once she found her footing. After a few more moments, she stopped and leaned back. "I think that's all I've got for today," he said kindly. "And that's enough." She looked at him, waiting for more explanation. Instead, he stood up and walked toward the center of the room. "Rhonda," he said, turning back to her, "I brought you here because you are capable of something few people are." "And what's that?" she asked. "Honesty," he replied. "Pure honesty through sound. My entire life, I've met thousands of musicians, but very few people let themselves be seen without hiding behind technique. You don't hide. You don't know how to." She wasn't sure if that was a strength or a flaw, but hearing it said with such warmth made it feel like a strength. He continued, "What happened in this room today will matter later. Much more than you think." Rhonda stood up slowly. "You make it sound like something big is coming." "It is," he said simply. "But you're not ready to understand it yet." She folded her arms thoughtfully. "So what should I do?" "Come back tomorrow," he said. "And the next day, if you can. Each time you sit at this piano, something inside you opens a little more. When the time comes, you'll see the full picture." She nodded. "All." Rhonda spent most of the afternoon wandering through the music estate, trying to understand the strange feeling growing inside her. The place was beautiful, calm, and peaceful, but something about it kept her alert. Maybe it was the way every hallway carried a faint echo. Maybe it was the way portraits of musicians lined the walls as if they were watching her pass. Or maybe it was the constant awareness that somewhere inside this quiet building, Leonardo was waiting for her to understand what he wanted from her. She had no plan, no script, and no clue what would happen next. She only knew that after the moment at the piano that morning, things had changed. The sound she made, the way the keys moved under her hands, it had surprised her as much as it surprised him. For a brief second, the room had reacted like it was alive, like the piano itself was breathing with her dot, and then the door had burst open, and two assistants had run in, startled looks on their faces, asking if everything was all right. Leonardo had calmly sent them away, but his expression afterward had been unreadable. Not angry, not happy, just deeply thoughtful, as if a puzzle piece had finally clicked into place. Rhonda spent the next few hours walking, trying to piece things together on her own. She passed shelves full of old sheet music, rooms filled with dusty instruments, and long windows that showed the ocean stretching endlessly beyond the cliffs. The sunlight wavered across the floors as the afternoon grew older, creating shifting shadows that followed her through the halls. Eventually, she stopped at a balcony overlooking the water. The waves rolled steadily, almost matching the rhythm she had played earlier. She leaned on the railing, listening to the wind. It was the first quiet moment she'd had since she arrived, and she let herself breathe it in fully. A soft step sounded behind her. She turned and saw one of the assistants, an older woman with kind eyes and a calm voice. Rhonda remembered her from earlier, but didn't know her name. Leonardo asked, "If you would join him in the main room when you're ready," the woman said gently. Rhonda nodded. "Do you know what he wants?" The woman gave a small smile. "He has been waiting a long time to find someone who could understand the feeling behind his new project." "I think you surprised him today." "Surprised him how?" Rhonda asked. The woman clasped her hands. "Most people play notes. Few play emotion without knowing it." Rhonda didn't know what to say to that. She wasn't a musician. She had no background in any of this. She didn't even know if Leonardo's reaction was excitement or concern. Still, she thanked the woman and walked back inside. The hallways seemed longer now, the air a little heavier, as if the echo of her morning performance still hung somewhere in the walls. She slowly approached the main room and paused at the entrance. The door was half open, and she could hear faint tapping, probably Leonardo, practicing a short melody. She stepped inside. Leonardo wasn't at the piano. Instead, he stood near a tall window, staring at a notebook filled with scribbles and music symbols. He turned the moment he heard her. "You took your time," he said, but not in a rude way, more like he expected she needed space. "I needed to think," Rhonda replied honestly. He nodded. "Good. Thinking is useful. Overthinking, however, can ruin everything." He placed the notebook on a table. "Sit." Rhonda hesitated, but then sat in the same chair she had used earlier. Leonardo paced around the room with deep concentration. "Do you know why I invited you here?" he asked. "No," she said. "I still don't." He stopped pacing and looked at her with a seriousness that made the whole room feel smaller. "Because your rhythm is different." She almost laughed, thinking he was joking, but his face stayed firm. "I don't play piano," she reminded him. "It is not about piano," he replied quickly. "It is about instinct. You lived much of your life reacting faster than most people can think. You learned to control your focus, your breath, your timing. Those qualities are rare. You understand intensity, but you also understand restraint. The piano responds to that." Rhonda blinked at him, unsure how to respond. "You make it sound like the piano is a living thing." Leonardo looked at the instrument beside them. "Sometimes I wonder if it is," he said softly. Then he turned back to her. "Play again." She shook her head. "I don't know what I even played before." "That is why I want you to play again," he said. The moment earlier it was pure. No thought. No fear of mistakes. No past, no expectation. The room reacted because you played with truth, not technique. Rhonda frowned. "The room reacted?" He lifted a hand. "Did you not feel it?" The air shifted. The sound deepened. Even the assistants felt something. They ran in before I called them. Rhonda remembered the feeling, a sudden tension. The sense that the piano was pulling something out of her, instead of the other way around. "I thought that was just me being nervous," she admitted. Leonardo shook his head. "Nonsense. Nervousness is shallow. What happened was not shallow." He walked behind the piano and pushed the bench forward slightly, clearing the space. Then he stepped back. "Sit," he said again. Rhonda hesitated. Her palms were warm, and a faint nervousness returned. She wasn't frightened, but the moment felt heavier than before. Something inside her whispered that whatever she played next would reveal more than she understood. But she sat. Her fingers hovered over the keys. She didn't touch them yet, waiting for some kind of direction. Leonardo crossed his arms. "This time, do not think about sounds. Think about something that matters to you. Anything. A memory, a moment, a person. Something that shaped you. Let your hands follow the feeling." Rhonda swallowed. It sounded simple, but the idea of exposing something personal through a piano she barely knew made her heart beat faster. Still, she closed her eyes. A memory came without warning. One from years ago, when she first understood strength wasn't just physical. She didn't try to shape the memory. She just let it sit quietly inside her. Her fingers moved. The first note was soft, gentle, almost shy. Then the next came, deeper, fuller, spreading slowly through the room like a warm wave. She didn't know what she was doing. She only let her hands move the way her mind guided them. The sound grew richer. Her breathing matched the rhythm without her noticing. The notes rose softly, then fell again like a slow conversation. For the first time, she felt connected to the piano, not as a performer, but as someone speaking without words. When she finally stopped, the room went quiet. Even the echoes seemed careful not to break the moment. Rhonda opened her eyes and exhaled, not realizing she had been holding her breath. Leonardo stood completely still. Finally, he whispered, "Yes, that is what I was looking for." Rhonda looked down at her hands. "I don't even know what I played." "That is the beauty," he said, stepping closer. You are not trying to impress. You are not trying to be a musician. You are becoming the link I needed. She raised an eyebrow. Link to what? Leonardo took a slow breath and pointed at the thick notebook on the table. My new composition. The one I have spent years trying to finish. It is more than music. It is emotion translated into sound. But I cannot complete it alone. I needed someone who could feel without forcing anything. Someone who could turn instinct into tone. Rhonda sat back, unsure how she felt about that. She had come here, expecting a strange invitation, maybe an interview or a rehearsal she had little part in. She never imagined he wanted her to be part of something so personal to him. But, why me? She asked softly. Leonardo gave a rare, warm smile. Because you are honest when you act. Most artists lose honesty the moment they perform. You have lived most of your life facing pressure, yet you did not let it twist your core. That honesty is rare. Rhonda didn't know what to say. Compliments never made her uncomfortable before, but this one felt different, deeper somehow. Leonardo continued, I want you to play again tomorrow morning. We will begin shaping the full piece. Rhonda nodded slowly. All right. And, he added, I want you to rest tonight. No thinking. No planning. Let your mind stay open. She stood and headed for the door, but stopped when he spoke once more. Rhonda, he said gently, something remarkable began today. The room felt it. I felt it. And I believe you felt it too. She didn't reply. She simply nodded and left quietly. Walking back through the halls, she touched her chest lightly. Her heartbeat was steady, but her mind was spinning. Something truly had begun, even if she couldn't name it. Something that made her feel seen in a way she never expected. Inside a pianist's world. As she reached her room and closed the door behind her, she whispered to herself, tomorrow. Let's see what happens tomorrow. The ocean outside continued its calm rhythm, almost answering her in its own quiet way. Rhonda woke earlier than she expected the next morning. She had slept lightly, drifting in and out of dreams that were filled with strange sounds, soft notes, echoing rhythms, and the feeling of keys moving under her fingertips, even though she was nowhere near a piano. When she finally sat up, the sky outside her window was still a pale gray, just beginning to brighten with the first hints of sunlight. For a few minutes, she stayed seated at the edge of the bed, letting her mind clear. There was a strange calm inside her chest, mixed with a quiet anticipation. She didn't know exactly what Leonardo wanted from her today, but part of her was curious, truly curious. That surprised her. She wasn't someone who got easily pulled into other people's worlds. Yet here she was, waiting for another moment at a piano she barely understood. She stretched, washed up, and got ready. A soft knock sounded at her door just as she finished tying her shoes. It was the same older woman from yesterday, holding a tray of simple breakfast items. She greeted Rhonda with her usual gentle smile. You'll want something in your system before you start today, the woman said kindly. He's already in the main room. Take your time, no rush. Rhonda thanked her, and the woman left the tray on the small table near the window. The food was warm and comforting: toast, fruit, a bit of yogurt. Nothing fancy, but enough to help settle her thoughts. After finishing, she made her way down the quiet hallways again. The estate felt even more peaceful in the early morning, almost sacred, as if the entire place was holding its breath. The floors were cool under her shoes, and the faint sound of the ocean filled the distant corners of the building. When she reached the main room, the door was half open. Inside, Leonardo was seated at the piano bench, but he wasn't playing. He was staring at the sheet music scattered across the piano top, tapping his fingers lightly against his leg as if counting a slow rhythm. He turned when he sensed her presence. Good morning. he said simply. Rhonda nodded. Morning. He studied her for a moment, then gave a small nod toward the piano. How do you feel today? A little confused, she admitted. But okay. Confusion is fine, he replied. It means you've stepped outside your usual world. That's where creativity lives. She wasn't sure she fully agreed, but she stepped closer to the piano anyway. Leonardo stood up and motioned for her to sit. I want to understand something, he said as she sat down. Yesterday, you played from emotion. You didn't think. You didn't fear mistakes. You let the memory guide your hands. Today, I want to see if you can connect without leaning on memory. Rhonda blinked. Connect to what? He placed a hand gently on the piano top. To the moment itself. To the present. To whatever your heart holds right now. She stared at the keys, feeling a slight pressure building inside her. Not fear more, like the awareness that she was about to be seen again, not physically, but emotionally. And that kind of vulnerability was unfamiliar territory. Leonardo stepped back. Take your time, he said softly. There's no rush. Rhonda closed her eyes and breathed slowly. The room felt different today, softer, more open. Maybe it was the morning light streaming through the windows. Or maybe it was her mind finally accepting that this wasn't a performance. It was something else entirely. She opened her eyes and placed her hands on the keys. For a long moment, she didn't move. She just felt the smooth surface beneath her fingertips, letting herself settle. And she played. The first few notes were gentle, almost hesitant, like testing the water before stepping in fully. But as she continued, the sound became warmer. She wasn't pulling from a memory this time. She was simply letting the music rise from whatever calmness lived inside her at that moment. The melody formed itself soft curves, slow rises, gentle falls. She felt the music rather than controlled it. Each note felt like a breath. Each pause felt like a blink. It was simple, natural, unforced. When she finally stopped, the silence that followed was soft and peaceful. Leonardo didn't speak at first. He walked slowly toward her, eyes locked on the piano, as if it had just spoken directly to him. That, he said quietly, was the sound of presence. No past, no fear, just truth. Rhonda sat back a little. It didn't feel complicated. It wasn't, he agreed. But simplicity is the hardest thing to achieve. Most people run from it. He reached for a page of sheet music and gently placed it in front of her. The page was filled with messy handwritten notes, circles, arrows, phrases, and symbols. It looked like someone had tried to empty their thoughts onto paper, but couldn't quite capture what they wanted. This is the part of the composition I've struggled with for years, he said. It never felt complete, never felt honest. Rhonda looked at him. And you think I can finish it? I think you can show me what it needs, Leonardo replied. Not with knowledge, not with technique, but with instinct. Rhonda gently lifted the page. Her stomach tightened slightly. She didn't want to ruin something he had spent years on. I don't want to mess up your work, she said. He shook his head. Mistakes are nothing. Dishonesty is everything. She didn't fully understand, but she nodded anyway. Leonardo stepped back, letting her have space. Play what you feel when you look at it, he said. Not what you think I want. Rhonda studied the messy sheet again. She didn't read music well, but she didn't need to. The scribbles almost felt like emotions trapped on paper: confusion, hope, tension, longing. The shapes alone told a story. She set the page down, positioned her hands, and let the feelings guide her. This time, the sound that came out was different, deeper, more textured, carrying a quiet struggle inside it. The notes were fuller, richer, and at moments they almost trembled. It was the kind of melody that felt like someone searching for something they couldn't explain, Leonardo's breath caught. He watched her play with wide eyes, as if he was witnessing something he had been chasing for years. When she finished, the room felt warm with emotion. Even Rhonda felt a tightness in her chest, like the music had pulled something raw from inside her. Leonardo stepped forward slowly, almost afraid to break the moment. "That," he whispered, "is the missing voice." Rhonda's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Missing voice?" He nodded, tapping the sheet music lightly. For years, this section felt empty. It needed a second voice, one that didn't come from trained technique, but from pure human truth. That's why no musician I hired could help me. They were too polished, too perfect. He pointed gently toward her heart. "You are not afraid of imperfection. That's what makes your sound alive." Rhonda didn't know how to respond. She felt strangely exposed, yet calm at the same time. Leonardo stepped closer, keeping his voice soft. "I want you to help me finish the entire piece. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. Together." "Together?" She repeated. "Yes," he said firmly. "You bring the raw emotion. I bring the structure. And together, we complete what neither of us could finish alone." She looked down at the piano again. A quiet realization washed over her. She actually wanted to do it. She didn't fully understand the world of music, but there was something honest about this process, something that made her feel grounded. "I'll try," she said softly. Leonardo gave a small, genuine smile. "Trying is all I ever wanted." Just then, the older woman from earlier stepped gently into the room. "Sorry to interrupt," she said quietly, "but breakfast is ready if either of you want something more." Leonardo nodded to her. "Thank you." Then he turned back to Rhonda. "Take a break. Rest your mind. We'll continue later." Rhonda stood up from the piano, feeling a mix of relief and something else she couldn't quite name. As she walked out of the room, she glanced back once more at the piano. For the first time since arriving, she didn't feel like a guest. She felt like she was becoming part of something meaningful, something bigger than either of them could create alone. The next morning started quietly, but the quiet felt a little strange, like the calm that sits in the air before a storm. Everyone was awake early, even though nobody had slept well. The plans they made the night before were still sitting heavy in their minds. Nobody wanted to admit they were nervous, but the nervous energy showed in small ways: shaky hands, quiet voices, unfinished sentences, and long stares at the floor. They gathered around the old wooden table again. The table had become the center of everything, the spot where they talked, argued, planned, and comforted one another. Now, as they sat down, they felt the weight of what they were about to do pressing down on all of them. One of them broke the silence by saying they had to stick close together that day. No wandering off, no side tasks, no shortcuts. They would take every step as a team, because the unknown path ahead didn't allow room for mistakes. Another person added that they needed to trust the signs they had uncovered, even if some of them still felt unbelievable. The rest nodded slowly. Trust had become more important than anything else. They packed their supplies carefully. Not much, just what they needed, and a couple of things that gave them comfort. A few snacks, a flashlight, a map they had drawn by hand, a notebook full of observations, and a small object they had found the night before that they still didn't fully understand. It didn't look important at first, but the more they looked at it, the more they felt it played some role in the bigger picture. When they stepped outside, the air felt cooler than usual, as if the world itself knew something was shifting. The sunlight peeked through the clouds slowly, creating long, soft shadows across the ground. For a moment, the simple sight made them feel a little calmer. They followed the trail leading out of the neighborhood. The trail was narrow but familiar. They had walked it hundreds of times before, but this time felt different. Every rustle in the bush, every chirp from a bird, and every gust of wind felt like part of a message they were still trying to understand. After a while, they reached a spot that looked ordinary on the surface, but had always felt a little unusual to them. Something about the place made people slow down whenever they passed by. It wasn't dangerous or frightening, just different, as if the energy around it shifted in a subtle way. It was the same place mentioned in the old notes they found earlier. They walked around slowly, looking for anything they might have missed before. One person noticed faint marks on the ground, almost like someone had dragged something heavy across the dirt. Another spotted stones arranged in a pattern that didn't seem natural. They all crouched down to study the details more closely. As they examined the stones, they realized the pattern lined up with part of the hand-drawn map. They placed the map on the ground next to the stones, adjusting it until the shapes matched. When everything lined up, they could see that the marks formed a path leading deeper into the wooded area. None of them liked the idea of following a path they didn't fully understand, but they knew this was where their search had been leading since the beginning. Taking a deep breath, they stepped onto the hidden path. The path wound through the trees like it had been carved intentionally, even though it didn't look like a typical hiking trail. The ground was uneven in some places, but the way the branches bent aside made it feel like the path wanted them to follow it. It wasn't eerie, just unusual. They walked quietly for a long time. The only sounds were their footsteps, the wind brushing through the leaves, and distant birds calling out to each other. Every so often, one of them would point out a symbol carved into a tree or a piece of fabric caught on a branch. These signs told them they were on the right track. Eventually, the path led them to a clearing. In the center stood an old structure. It wasn't large, but it was sturdy, built from stone and wood. Time had worn it down, but it still looked strong. None of them had seen it before, even though they had lived near the area for years, which made the discovery even more surprising. They walked around the structure slowly, inspecting every detail. One noticed a wooden door that looked newer than the rest of the building. Not brand new, but not as aged as the walls around it. Someone must have been there recently. They glanced at each other, silently asking the same question: should they open it? They stood there for what felt like minutes, too nervous to move, but too curious to retreat. Finally, one of them reached for the handle. Their hand shook slightly, but they steadied themselves and pushed the door open. Inside, the air felt cool and still. Sunlight trickled in through cracks in the walls, creating soft beams that lit up the space just enough to see. There wasn't much inside: some shelves, a table, a few old tools, and stacks of papers scattered across the floor. They stepped in carefully, sorting through the papers one by one. Many were too old to read, but a few had writing clear enough to understand. Some pages described the history of the area, while others mentioned strange events from decades earlier. One paper talked about the same strange signs they had been studying, linking them to a series of discoveries made long before they were born. Another sheet mentioned a device, something small but powerful in its purpose. They looked at the object they had been carrying since the previous night. It matched the description almost perfectly. Suddenly, everything made more sense. They realized the object wasn't random. Someone had left it on purpose, and it was meant to guide them toward something bigger. They dug deeper through the papers and found notes explaining that the structure had once been a gathering place for a small group of people who met quietly to study the land and its unusual patterns. They weren't trying to hide anything harmful. They were simply trying to understand the unexplained things that had happened around the area for years. Their notes were careful, thoughtful, and full of curiosity rather than fear. As they read the notes, they started to feel connected to those people from the past. They felt as though they were picking up a story that had been left unfinished. The thought was both comforting and overwhelming. They found one final note tucked behind a wooden board on the wall. It was short but clear. It explained that the device they found was meant to unlock something located a short distance from the structure. The note didn't say exactly what it was, only that it would help bring clarity to things that had remained confusing for a long time. They looked at each other again, silently agreeing they had to find whatever the note referred to. They carefully stored the papers in their bags and stepped back outside. The clearing looked brighter now. Maybe it was just the effect of the sunlight shifting, but it felt like the place was urging them forward. They searched around the clearing until one of them noticed a set of stones arranged in another odd pattern. The pattern pointed toward a narrow path, hidden behind a thick row of bushes. They pushed through the branches and found the path waiting on the other side. The path was shorter than the previous one, and at the end of it, they found a small hollow in the ground. Inside the hollow was a box, old but intact. The design matched some of the drawings from the papers they had found. They sat down around the box. There was a round indentation on the top, the exact size of the object they had been carrying. Their hearts pounded, but they knew what they had to do. Carefully, they placed the object into the indentation. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the box made a soft clicking sound. The lid loosened and slowly lifted open. Inside the box were more notes. But something else caught their attention, even more several small items. Each connected in some way to the research the group from the past had been doing. One item appeared to be a small recording device. Another looked like a piece of a map that completed the one they already had. But what mattered most was a letter placed neatly on top dot. The letter explained everything clearly and gently. The group from the past had discovered unusual things happening in the area, and they believed the strange signs were signals, not threats. The devices and notes they left behind were meant to help future explorers continue their work. They believed that someday someone would pick up the path where they left it dot. The letter ended by saying that anyone who found their work should continue with patience, kindness, and curiosity. Nothing harmful was hidden here, only knowledge, history, and the desire to understand the world with open eyes. As they finished reading, a quiet stillness settled over them. Not an eerie stillness, but a peaceful one. They felt like they had stepped into a story that had been waiting for them all along. They packed the items carefully and closed the box. They didn't lock it. They simply placed the lid back on and left it the way they found it. Walking back along the path, they talked softly about what they had discovered. Their fear had turned into something else: excitement, understanding, and a deep appreciation for the people who had come before them. By the time they returned home, the sun was beginning to set. The warm orange light filled the sky, making everything look softer and calmer. Their long day had finally come to a close, but they knew the bigger journey was far from over. They gathered around the wooden table again, placing all the new items in the center. This time, the table didn't feel heavy with worry. It felt full of possibility. They knew they still had much to learn, but they weren't afraid anymore. They were ready to keep going, step by step, discovering the truth behind